You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Welcome to episode 30 of Ethnocynology. I'm your host, David Ian Howe. I'm an anthropologist and archaeologist, and I'm currently getting over the flu or something very much like it. It is not COVID. It just was like writing all last week and then just lack of sleep, and then woke up one night with like a high fever. And you know, when you have those crazy fever dreams where, here's the one thing, I don't have a lot of dreams that I remember, but when I'm sick, I definitely have very vivid, like 3D. I remember everything about the dream, like spatially where I am and stuff. I was in my old house that I grew up in on Long Island with Dr. Spencer Pelton. For some reason was there arguing with my father about we're going to go to 7-Eleven to get slushies. Anyway, if you can relate, the fever dreams are crazy. I also then, I'm not sponsored by Hexclad, but was somehow in another dream cooking the contents and words of The Winds of Winter that George R. R. Martin has not finished in my Hexclad with olive oil and like concocting better plot line. I can't describe what was happening. This is the speech of someone who's on a lot of NyQuil. Well, the content was when I was on a lot of NyQuil. Right now I am not. Anyway, all that said, I'm getting over that. So if I cough and I sound weird, that's what that is. But this will be an audio only exclusive episode for you. Just to give you some life updates here on this, I am currently writing a book. I'm working on right now a video for a site that will be pretty interesting. I can't say much more about it. I think this will come out before that releases. But if this has released before, if that video has come out before then and podcast has come out before this one, then yay, you've already heard that. So continuing on, writing a book. And tomorrow, today I'm recording this on February 8th, which is my birthday. I am 34 years old, which is crazy. I'm almost 40, have no children, no lands, no titles. I guess I have a master's and an RPA. Those are titles. I have no land. A lot of George R. R. Martin lately in my life. So just, you know, land is on the mind. And also, I don't hold any lands or knighthoods. But after that, it's Super Bowl Sunday. I did not watch Super Bowl. I was busy doing some work. Apparently, Bad Bunny's performance was great. I don't know who was even in the Super Bowl, nor do I care. If that offends you, I'm very sorry. I'm just not a football guy. But tomorrow, I'm packing to then head to Nashville, see some stuff, deal with some stuff, and then fly from there to Mexico, where I'm going to Oaxaca for a week with a friend. I'm going to go do some research there about people, like indigenous people and their uses of dogs, and talk to them there about that. And then after that, I'm going to see Monte Alban while I'm there. Obviously, I want to see some cool stuff, but I've never been to Mexico many times. Obviously, Cancun, I think once for work. Puerto Vallarta when I was a kid. Tepic, I guess when I was in high school. Tepic, which is in Nayarit. Mexico is like real Mexico to me. And I've been to... Yeah, that's where I've been. Yeah, those 2 times. But this time I'm going to Oaxaca, and then after that I'm taking a bus there to Mexico City, where I'm giving a talk, and also I will be meeting with some researchers about dogs, and I've just never been to Mexico City, and I'm meeting with some friends who are students there, another researcher. I'm just going to spend some time in the museums looking at dog stuff and Nahua culture, I should say, because I've just never been, which will be exciting. So it is for work, but also it is for the book. And a lot of what the book is about, I wanted to write a book about the history of dogs, just, you know, put all my knowledge into book form. With the agency that reached out to me, I believe I'm allowed to talk about, I just can't give too much specifics, I guess, but the agency that reached out, you know, it's like, you can't just write a history of dogs. That's more of an academic thing. This needs to be more of like narrative driven, you know, and a lot of the stuff I pitched to them and I'm like, let's do this. A lot of times I'll write like a draft and they'll send it back and say, you know, hey, you should add a story about Strider here, or, you know, another personal story about dogs in your childhood and things like that. Just adding things like that wouldn't be in an academic book, which is quite a struggle in its own way, because I'm trying to just spit all the knowledge I have out. But the agent and her job is to be like, and her assistants are like, hey, you need to connect with people. Like, why does this matter to people? Like, how do dogs make you human? Or like, why X, Y, and Z? It's really interesting because I could just sit there and spit all the information I have about dogs out into a book. I probably will at some point as well. But this makes it a lot more challenging, and I find that fun. And a lot of it is to do with like dogs' roles and like unique And I've talked about this in my lecture, and this is part of why I put the lecture up last week, because I don't think on this podcast yet I have like really dove into those topics as much as I would have liked to, because I've just, my mental bandwidth about dogs, one, kind of went out the window when Strider died, and then two, has been going into this book. So when I sit here to go, oh, I have to make a podcast now about dogs, I'm like, I don't want to talk about dogs right now. So apologies for that, but this one will be about dogs here, and to tie this back in with Mexico, sorry to be all over the place, but a lot of things that unite dogs across cultures is their role in mythology and their roles in creation stories and their roles in cultural customs, I guess would be the word, and just roles in human culture. And I would define culture, going into book mode, as the study of human behavior through time is archaeology, but anthropology is a study of human cultures, languages, and just behavior, I would say. You're studying humans, and ethnocynology, by extent, would be the study of dogs in human cultural contexts. And a lot of the book, too, I'm like, hey, I need to define this or ethnocynology. And they're like, well, you already have. You don't need a whole chapter on it. And it's just very interesting how this all works. And I can't say too much about what it will be until I got all this stuff's like signed and ready to go. But yeah, to bring it back to the Mexico stuff, a big part of what makes people human is, one, knowing that we're going to die. So memento mori in that sense, like remember all men die or everyone dies. I think memento mori is just remember death, technically. All men must die is Game of Thrones. Sorry, Game of Thrones is on the mind, Valar Morghulis. But the fact that we all die, and I had an uncle pass of cancer in November, and it kind of bummed me out. I mean, obviously it bummed me out, but like, I just didn't know his cancer was that bad, and we hadn't talked in like years, and we had texted here and there on holidays and whatnot, like as much as I had texted him the past 10 years or so. But it's difficult because he lives 6 hours away from me in New York when I grew up on Long Island, so I didn't see him as much anyway. And then when we moved to Tennessee, it was even less so that I saw him. And then when I went to grad school, like, you know, and moved to the other side of the country, I barely talked to my mom and dad every day, so I just kind of lost contact. But yeah, I didn't know it was that bad. There's a lot of other stuff involved in that too. It's just, you know, personal. But yeah, it really hit me. And I hadn't lost a person to me that close before, you know, like a blood relative that like my uncle like was there a lot when I was a kid. And I remember like Uncle Rick, he was the man. And like he'd play guitar and he was funny. I learned to be funny and like silly from my uncle, because my dad's silly, but my uncle was like silly. And like it was just very fun. And I don't mean to make this a whole thing about my uncle, and this was in November, so rest in peace, Uncle Rick, you're the man. But all that to say, it was the first like brush with mourning of a person that I ever had in real life, because I'd lost a great uncle who like fought in Iwo Jima, and he was like a distant great uncle on my mom's side. I didn't know him. I think I met him twice. My mother's sister's husband's father, so I guess my grandfather-in-law, I don't know, my uncle's dad, and my mom's sister and her husband, I'm very much more closer to, because I grew up right next to them on Long Island and I visit them every year. His father was a vet in World War II as well. He was not in the Pacific, he was in Europe, and ended up getting wasted in a chateau with this old French guy after the storming of Normandy and his wine cellar, and they just got that, according to them, that was a story. I don't know how accurate that is the first few days, because I imagine after storming the beaches, you're like, whew, you want some reprieve. So I had that. I wasn't too close with him either. All that to say, going on tangents again, have not lost a human, knock on wood, like, you know, like a sibling or a parent, or I know your nieces and nephews are nibblings. I don't know what I guess your tios, to keep it Mexican themed. I haven't lost someone like that before. But part of it too, which was interesting, was I had lost Strider the year before, and I'd lost many dogs in my life. And I'm sure many of you can relate to this too, that like, and something I talk about in the book is you have multiple dogs in your lifetime that like prepare you for that. And if you lose a human before you've lost a dog, like, I'm sorry, that has to suck, because it's like grieving's like a full body feeling, like emotion, or like just like illness. I can't really describe it. It just like sucked. And I know like my cousins who grew up around my uncle every day and like were in and out of the house and stuff, obviously have much more, I'm not saying say stolen valor of like my uncle died, their grandfather died. It's like it obviously was much more impactful to them, but it still, was mourning. And not that I hated to think about it in an anthropological thing, because I was trying to, this is like science brain problem for me, and I'm sure for many of you listening as well, like trying not to sit there and think of everything in terms of like scientific concepts. Like, okay, what does mourning define this in my head? Because a lot of times, especially if I'm having an anxiety attack or depression in other aspects of my life, I'm like, okay, drink some water, breathe, like you're going to be okay. You're not, maybe the edible was too much and my heart's pounding and I'm like, oh, like you're not going to die of a heart attack. You're going to be fine. Just drink some water, all that. But like mourning was one I hadn't experienced before. And with that, being around my cousins and seeing how much it affected them, and like especially my first cousin's, his daughter and our daughters and like his grandkids and stuff who were with him every day, seeing how like at the funeral and stuff, how it affected them, looking at it scientifically, like, okay, every human in history has dealt with this. And I don't mean to make this weird, but like every culture has to, in that sense, marriage, birth, and death, I think, are the three constants. I think there's two more. Rite of passage, like a birthday or getting your driver's license. Every culture has a version of that, some type of celebration around that culturally. And I want to say it's life, like birth, death, marriage, rite of passage, and there's one more. I'm not prepared to speak about this right now, but there's one more that's a cultural constant in each culture, and that was like something documented by early anthropologists in the late 1800s, 1900s. It documented that. But anyway, something that every human experiences is death and mourning and funerals. And my uncle was a Mason. He was in the Scottish Rite. He was a Shriner. He was in the Knights Templar. He was in like a bunch of stuff, and all these people. He was in the army. He was drafted into Vietnam. He paratrooped, and then he was in the army band. I believe he played tuba, if I'm not mistaken. And then he was in a band after the army, and like he always played bass. He didn't teach me guitar, but he helped me with it here and there. Definitely taught me how to like sing and play at the same time by like watching him do it. Just at least the confidence of he just did it with such ease. And I'm like, okay, well, this is clearly in my genes. He can do it. I can do it, kind of thing. Getting sidetracked from dogs here, but I guess all that to say, Noah, if you're listening, like, not that I'm at the funeral, like looking at it as a scientist being like, okay, how do humans mourn? It's just like one of those things of like, to help me, to deal with it and to ground myself is to look at things scientifically. So like, the reason I bring up the Masonic things, it's like it's a very cultural, and there's customs and rituals to that, like how that funeral process goes, or like the celebration of life, or whatever you want to call this memorial service, how all that goes. And it helped me ground through that and like not be like an emotional wreck by being like, okay, just like take note of like what's happening. How are people feeling? And it's probably unhealthy to an extent for me to look at everything like this. And even at my cousin's weddings, I can't be like fully friends' weddings as well. Like when I'm there looking at it through an anthropological lens of being, okay, this is what a marriage celebration looks like. And like technically back in the day, you were like unifying houses, or you were like, your wife was, unfortunately, and I hate looking at weddings like this too, but like it's inherently property transfer and like inheritance and wealth transfer and stuff like that. And it's just kind of this weird custom that we've kept just facets of now, that it's just the union of two people. And like, it's interesting how some people take each other's names and other people don't. Now, men sometimes take the women's names, or women take the men's names, or like sometimes women keep their own name or they hyphenate it. Just things like that, like at weddings. And then I always got to give speeches, things like that, that it just anthropologically, I can't turn that off in my head. Like I have to look at it that way. So looking at funerals, and in this sense, seeing all my family and how it brings people together that I hadn't seen in like decades, or like maybe at least one decade, some in cases two, hadn't seen people in that long. And like going back to where my dad's from in upstate New York, and it's very different from where my mom's from in New York, which is outside the city. It's a very different state, almost like a different country in a way in terms of culture. And then my mom's, ethnic background and my dad's ethnic background are much different. So there's that aspect too. All that to say, with dogs, you have multiple dogs in your life that prep you for that. Like, not that we buried him, but the process of like dealing with death. And I had dealt with Strider last year, and it like physically affected me for like months, because more than I thought it would. Because how would I put this? Like, just, I live alone. Like, I mean, I have a roommate, but like I spend most of my time alone in my room at my desk, and like Strider would be here by my feet. And I'd have him there, and like a physical, living, breathing technology or creature in my room that I'm okay. I need to let him out. I need to feed him. I need to water him. He would come to me for affection sometimes, or I would usually more go to him for affection, or to give him affection that he didn't want. And just the physical touch of somebody or another creature in your house. It's fascinating to me that can be replaced by a dog and not just be a human. And I've been single for like most of my adult life. Like, I had a girlfriend in college. I've had dating stints here and there over the past decade, but like mostly I'm a single dude. So like physical touch and affection from a human partner is just not something that's more foreign to me than not. So in a lot of cases, I think it's the opposite for people, where it's like not having someone in your house or your bed is completely weird, and they feel alone, or they feel like depressed if they don't have that. Like, to me, like I like my space. I like having all of that freedom to myself, like what to watch on Netflix, what to cook for dinner. Like, I like that. And at this point, having a partner scares me, because it's like, I don't want to share them. Like, I just want to do what I want to do. I'm open to it. I'm not like, I don't push it away, but it's just not on my priority list. I'm getting distracted there, but dogs are a like proxy to help me understand human things like that. And the book kind of crescendos into this, like, you know, dogs help us understand death in that sense. And I didn't write too much with my uncle in the proposal that is going in, but I mention it. And it's like just the fact that death brings all people together in that sense. And like, you know, you put political stuff aside, you put familial stuff aside, and I forgot about X, Y, and Z family beef and who hasn't met who and all that stuff. It's just funny to me. But all that is put aside when there's a death. And last year when Strider died, like, I had to put a lot of stuff aside, because it's just like, I didn't realize how much it would affect me. Not having a dog in the house, one, but the second point to that too was like, I didn't have to walk him every day anymore. So therefore I lost a lot of exercise. I gained some weight because I didn't have to go for a walk that day. And I didn't realize, like, oh yeah, you need to go for walks for your own health. And you need to go to walks for your own mental clarity every day. And like, even if it's just to listen to podcasts, but because Strider was so aggressive and like violent in his last few months there, did his like pain stuff, it just became like I don't have to do that today. I don't have to worry about him biting a kid around the block. I don't have to worry about him like snapping off his leash and chasing a car and getting hit, things like that. Or like, who's he going to growl at today? Who am I going to have to apologize to today? Like, all that stuff like didn't happen because because of that, like, I didn't have to go for walks anymore. And now it sounds like I'm talking to my therapist or doctor making excuses for not walking, but I'm hoping you guys can relate to these kinds of things. When you've lost a dog or lost a person, what are like things in your life that have changed and things like that you don't really think about? And then on together there, like, what are some things that dogs and humans to get, like, when you lose a dog or lose a human, what's similar there? Did you mourn more for your dog than you did for a human? In this case, yes, I think I did, because I knew my dog every day for the last decade I lived with him. From the moment I saw, like, before his eyes opened, I knew him, and I saw when his eyes closed. I knew that dog his whole life. He was there with me almost every day. There were some stints where he stayed with my parents when I was doing field work and stuff, but like for, let's just say 9.5 of the 10 years, he was with me every day. And through COVID, I didn't have a partner through COVID. I lived alone with Strider, and like, he was the only living, breathing thing I had through all of that. I was dating at that time, but it was long distance through COVID, and that's a whole thing. I think there were 2 of those. That regardless, he was the only physical thing in my house, and I kill plants immediately. Like, I look at a plant and it dies. He's the only thing I could take care of. So with that, I'm going to hit a commercial here in a sec, but mainly just the going to Mexico, a lot of the dogs in like mythology and dogs in death is very ubiquitous across human culture, and it's the most well documented and most well kept, I think, through all dog history and lore that I've researched through Dia de los Muertos, especially the one for pets, where you make ofrendas or like little altars for your dog to come eat. In the Dia de los Muertos, you're like, people are coming back, the spirits of your ancestors. It's a very Aztec tradition mixed with Catholicism, where like deceased ancestors come back and you leave food for them to eat and pictures of them on the table to remember them, and for them to come eat food that they liked and stuff to bring back with them into the spirit world, or Mictlan, if you want to call it that. And I'm sure if it's Catholic, it's heaven. But for dogs, though, they also, it's a very Nahua, Maya, and I think other parts of Mexico as well. Like the Tlaxcalans had a lot of dogs. The people at Monte Alban did too, from what I've researched there too. Dogs are very like an intrinsic part of human culture, and were cared for and respected in that culture, and they were sacrificed and eaten in their own ways too. But so were people, but people were also cared for. So with that, I'll continue on here. Let me hit a quick commercial break and we'll be right back. And we're back with episode 30 of Ethnocynology. I know people hate when I go on tangents where I'm saying like and as constantly, and so I'm very sorry, but I'm just kidding. All that rant aside, my uncle dying was something that I hadn't experienced yet in human form. I had experienced it with Maggie as a kid when I had to put Maggie down in high school. I talked about that in that episode. So like Beagle mix that we had as a kid. She got really sick and started to seize a lot, and we just had to put her down. I got her when I was in kindergarten, and we put her down when I was in, I think, freshman or sophomore year of high school. Like she lived a long enough. And got really sick, and then we had to put Athena down, I think just after COVID or before COVID. It was before COVID. We had to put her down. Also got really sick. We got her from essentially what was a puppy mill. We didn't know it was a puppy mill, but like, my stance on that. If the dog's living and breathing and needs a home, adopt it. I don't give a fuck where it came from. I think shaming people on that is weird. Like, just accept the dog and love it and care for it. Like, I'm not supporting the puppy. If paying for Athena outside of a Petco, when I walked in to get chinchilla food and I saw this puppy sitting in a cage and like wanted a home, like if I have to give that puppy mill however much money, I think it was like $200 to get her, like, am I not going to give the puppy mill money and keep supporting? It's a moral dilemma, right? Do I pay the puppy mill people and give the dog a better life, or do I just turn my head and say, no, I'm not supporting a puppy mill, and just let that dog go to someone else's house? It's one of those weird things. So we got Athena. She got really sick because she had terrible breeding. Beautiful, cute chocolate lab. I had to put her down recently. I think it was 2019. It might have been early 2020, to be honest. All that said, I've put down multiple dogs. I had to put Jon Snow down. Jon Snow, my cat, bring it back to Game of Thrones, was a pretty traumatic one. I don't think I talked about that in the other one too. He threw a thrombic something. If you look up thrombic cat, yes, feline arterial thromboembolism, FATE, F-A-T-E, or saddle thrombus, is a severe life-threatening emergency where a blood clot, usually originating from heart disease, lodges in the aorta, blocking circulation to the hind limbs. Symptoms include sudden hind limb paralysis, extreme pain, cold paws, bluish pads. Immediate veterinary care is crucial. So I came home, I think from like the grocery store or something one morning at my parents' house visiting one weekend. And I'm just so thankful I was home visiting that weekend from when I worked in Georgia. John was home, and like me and John and Strider got along. He's the only cat that Strider actually could get along with and like cohabitate with without attacking, because John was a huge cat and would swat him away, but also John knew Strider since he was a puppy, and I already had John. So Strider grew up knowing, okay, I can't mess with him because John would like beat the shit out of him when he was a puppy if you mess with him. But yeah, they got along, and he would play rough with them sometimes, but never bit or anything like that. So I know there was no foul play there. And the vet even like verified, no, Strider did not bite him like when I wasn't looking or something. But yeah, I just came home and John was just meowing really loud. Like, and it was like, he talked a lot, but he had multiple meows. And this one was like a, hey, come help me meow that I hadn't heard in a while. And I came and I like went to look at him, and he was just in the hallway, like laying there, flopping around like a seal. And I thought he was just playing, and I was like, you goofball. And I was like messing with him. And then he like wouldn't move. And I'm like, what are you doing? And then I realized, oh, he can't use his back legs. What's happening? And I started freaking out. And I called my aunt, who's a vet, and she was like, "Can you take him to the vet right now?" And then like hung up the phone like quickly. And she didn't want me to panic. Took me to the vet. I don't remember if that's the case, but that'd be weird if my aunt not to stay on the phone with me for like 30 minutes talking. But I probably was just like, okay, I'll take him to the vet, and hung up. But took him to the vet, and the vet just gave me this look of like, yeah, it's a thrombic, whatever. And then I called my mom and was like, hey, John's got a throm. And she was like, oh, fuck. And like came. And basically the vet was just like, he's in extreme pain. He can't feel his hind legs. He's confused. Basically, like when your leg, it's kind of what I have with GBS, where your legs just go extremely numb and you get that pins and needle feeling immediately. Like I have that from GBS. It's like residual. If I sit too long or stand too long, my legs just go completely like numb. And it's really annoying. It's like you're walking on stilts. And it happens to my arms and fingers too, especially after typing for a while. But I can't imagine when you're a cat not knowing what that is, and then it's permanent. Like I can still move my legs and stuff. He couldn't move his. All of that happening is just got to be chaotic. And the vet basically was like, he's in a lot of pain. And then her hand was like bloody because he bit her. And she was like, normally I'd have to file a police report and stuff, but like given the circumstances, like whatever, you're gonna have to put him down right now. That would be my choice. Or he's gonna be in a wheelchair, like cat wheelchair thing, and it's going to require a lot of therapy and medication to like be okay the rest of his life. I would volunteer to put him down. And my mom was like, yeah, let's put him down. And like, because at that point, my mom had basically adopted John as her cat. Story there. But yeah, my mom just basically took my cat from me in a kind, loving way. Just like, I want a cat and I don't have a pet right now. So took John, and then, okay, because it was after Athena. All that said, John was like a very quick, and like I had to just like, he was my cat. I adopted him in college outside of a house party, which is why he was my bastard child, Jon Snow, and bastard child because he wasn't a dog. And I'm not a cat guy, but I loved that cat. He was huge, a very good cat. He would go outside and hunt, bring back shit all the time, just like the definition of a good cat. And I had to make that decision like right there and be like, yeah, put him down. And like just seeing him in pain in a box with like a tube of gas going in there to keep him calm and stuff. And he had bit his tongue. Just not a good sight. And I'm sorry to get graphic with that, but that was like a quick brush with death. But again, that's a cat, not a person. So my uncle dying and like seeing him dying of cancer, and I'd seen cancer in pets before, and I'd see cancer in people, but not like that late, like on hospice cancer. And like, that was like rough to see. And like how, you know, just like, what's the word? Like, not sick, but just how like weak and like in someone's like last few weeks of life, like how like, you know, they need everyone's got to help them, and he's got a nurse and stuff. And it's just like, it was hard to see. And like, I could see how hard it was for my family dealing with it, all that. So seeing that in a human for the first time was wild in that sense, because I'm writing a book about this right now, and then like lo and behold, I'm dealing with it in person in my own life, and like I'm trying my best not to think about it in that moment anthropologically, and not in like a content sense, like, oh, this would make a great pod, like that never crossed my mind. But it was more like, okay, so this is what human death is. What is this like? How do I file this in my head? Like, how do I objectively file this in my head for what this is without getting too emotionally attached to it, if that makes sense? And again, that might be a problem I need to deal with in therapy, or maybe that's good and it's healthy and it didn't let me get too messed up. Obviously I cried. I like sobbed after I went home and saw him. And then after he died, like I went to visit him before he died. And then after he died, I, you know, was like, we went to the celebration of life and stuff with the Masons and all that, and saw how like it affected my family. And like another great benefit of that too is that like I've kept in contact with a lot of my family that I haven't in a long time. Like I hadn't seen my cousin since he was probably like 5, I think. Now he's like 15. He texts me all the time, like, how you doing? Text him back, how you do? Like just that, you know, death brought that. I reconnected with my cousin who I forgot, like grew up with me when I was in high school. She lives in Tennessee with us for a lot of the time. Came to visit a lot. She was teaching down there, I think, and like saw her a bunch. And like I just, again, lost a lot of contact with family just because of life and being an adult and being all over the place. And then I rarely check Facebook and all that, and like don't really keep up with people. I feel terrible. I barely call my mom's mom, who's still alive in 96 right now, or will be 96 in August. I should probably call her tomorrow. Hey, it's my birthday and she didn't call me today. So there's that. But my cousins who I met, or not met, my cousins who I interacted with in New York at the funeral and stuff, like a lot of them texted me like, happy birthday today, which is another thing, death brought. So in that sense, like it is interesting. And I keep distracting from the dog thing here, but in Mexican culture, as I mentioned before, it's still the way death, from my understanding from Mexican friends and from reading about it, death in Mexico is seen more of like a celebration. I know that sounds like on the nose to say, but like with De los Muertos and all that, it's just like the word is like synchronism, how Aztec or like Nahua and like indigenous traditions mixed with imposed Catholic ones, if that makes sense. But a lot of people embrace Catholicism now and how that mixes together, but they keep on to their roots. And then I've seen other people too, I think more on the conservative side, who will say that like the less religious kids become in Mexico, the less like Catholic they become, the less like they are tied to their indigenous roots in that sense too, because they lose it in both ways. You lose the indigenous stuff that was, ripped away from them as being converted to Catholicism and, Hispanolized, I guess colonized would be the word there. Hispanicized, is that a word? And it is in Spanish. I don't know if that is in English, but whatever. That mix, kind of, you lose a lot of that. But in Mexico still, and I remember Guillermo del Toro, I saw, who's a Mexican director, I saw him give an interview too, and they're like, why are your movies so involved with death and like, but also like poetic? And he's like, well, I'm Mexican. And like, then that always stuck out to me in that sense too, because that's a thing. But there's a lot of burials around Mexico City. And what's interesting too, in a lot of places in the old world, so like Mesopotamia, China, Europe, Africa, and mostly North Africa, dogs are kind of seen in society, though they are venerated, especially in like China and Zoroastrianism in Iran, very like venerated beings, and there's statues of them all over the place, like the Fu dogs in China. The dog's part of the zodiac. So is the rat, though. But they're venerated in that sense. But in a lot of those big, huge population centers in the old world, dogs are stray, they're pariahs, they have fleas, they have diseases, they can bite you with rabies and stuff. They're kind of seen as pests and stuff like that. But to my understanding, in ancient Mexico, it was still kind of held, and even in the Inca as well later on, where the dog was brought later. The dogs weren't there since like Paleo times. They were brought later through trade routes after the spread of agriculture, because dogs couldn't get through the tropics, which is also why dogs aren't in sub-Saharan Africa and why the dingo doesn't reach Australia till like 5,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. Anyway, that's a tangent. But in the Americas, dogs are still treated with respect and like care. And even on the plains where dogs are like eaten ceremonially, it's still out of respect for the dog's sacrifice to humanity in that sense, like that. It's a celebration of like how dogs, can give their lives, and they work for people and like give life to humans. And that's a specific, I don't want to get too in the weeds of that. That's more for the Plains Anthropology podcast to cover, but I won't say too much about that there. But dogs are eaten ceremonially on the plains among multiple groups. I won't say many or various, I'll say multiple. And in pre-Hispanic Americas all over, but they were also highly worshipped and respected in the god Xolotl. And again, to say God is odd because it's saying God, like an Aztec god, would be like saying like a Greek god or a Roman god. That's not the case. It's more of like a spiritual or divine concept. I can't really describe it. Like Quetzalcoatl, the serpent god, the Huitzilopochtli is the god of the sun. He's not the god of the sun. He's like the spiritual and like metaphysical essence of the idea and the concept of the sun is Huitzilopochtli. It's very difficult to explain this stuff through translations, but an exonym that we're all familiar with is God in a pantheon, right? So he's the god of the sun. Xolotl was the god of, I want to say, and there's multiple gods of darkness, but like god of dark, dead, and I want to say sacrifice. Let me see. God, in terms of sacrifice for people. Yeah, fire, lightning, death, the underworld, and twins. Okay, yeah, just everything. So it just depends. That's Google AI saying that. I need to pull it up in my notes, but look up Xolotl. It's Xolotl. Xolotl is how you actually say that. And he was Quetzalcoatl's brother. But in a ceremony when all of the, let's say, quote unquote, gods were trying to create the world and heat the sun to fuel the world and give humans warmth, they all were like, hey, we should sacrifice somebody to get the sun going. And they were like, let's sacrifice Shalot. And Shalot was like, no. And he hid in all these different places and hid in as different forms. And most famously, he hid as a salamander in the water. And that's where they found him. And then they cut his head off and sacrificed him into the sun. And then like, hey, funny, you'd come back. Because that's how the Aztec creation story goes. But he most famously, and that's why the little Mexican salamander thing is called an axolotl, which is an axolotl is how you say that. But you can look that up too. Axolotl. So Axolotl. It's a little smiley guy, but it's named after the Aztec dog god, which is interesting. So another thing too, through line through the book as well, is that dogs in Mexican society and how Shalot in the creation story goes down into the underworld and helps create humans with his brother Quetzalcoatl. He is very much like Anubis in that sense. And Anubis is the Aztec jackal or dog god or like canid god, we can call him. And again, he's more of a concept of canids than he is a specific dog or jackal. He was the first to mummify somebody. He mummified Osiris after Set cut Osiris to pieces and scattered him across the land. They got everything. Isis, the good Isis, the Egyptian one, asked Anubis to go find all his parts, and he found every part but his, we'll just say, phallus, and that's what made her sad, because that was the only thing they couldn't find, which I find ironic, which is why I messed this up in my lecture last week. If you caught that in the lecture, I said that they found everything. They only found his phallus, but they actually found everything but his phallus, which is funny to me because I guess in my head I messed that up when I was giving that talk, because dogs usually are the ones that seek that part out. So I got a lot of comments on that on YouTube being like, you're wrong. And I was like, okay, yes, I am. So my bad. I very much messed it up. But if you look at the slide behind me, it says the complete opposite. So all that to say, dogs associated with death. And one I learned quite a bit of for the book was Zoroastrianism. And dogs, and like Zoroastrianism is interesting, and it's an old pre-Islamic Iranian religion, pre-Hellenic, before the Greek gods got spread and the Roman gods. Though they held on to Zoroastrianism for a long time, it's like an original monotheistic religion before Judaism, or maybe they're contemporaneous. Oh, Zoroastrianism is generally considered older than contemporaneous with development or formal monotheistic Judaism. While Abrahamic traditions date back roughly 2000 BCE, scholars often place the prophet Zoroaster between 1000 and 600 BCE. Okay, that just confused me more, but yes, it is older. It's a Zoroastrian, or it's a monotheistic concept, and Zoroaster is the prophet for them, or like the god, or like I think he's like the divine being is how he's described as. But dogs helped him and accompany him with protecting the dead. And there's a lot of laws in ancient Iran, or ancient Persia, I should say, Zoroastrian Persia, where like hitting a dog or kicking a dog or anything like that would be seen as equal to kicking or harming a human in law, which is quite interesting. So interesting in the sense that too, and I've talked about this multiple times, but I got interviewed on NPR one time, and the first question they asked me was like, why are dogs considered treated unkindly in Islamic culture? And I was like, that maybe ask my name first before you dive into that. I don't know. And after the people had already identified as Muslim people, but which no issue with that. It was just the lead in. I don't know how to answer that. I'm sorry, but all that to say, when Islam and Arab caliphates then take over the Middle East, dogs are seen more as like pest-y, and they're seen like more as uncleanly in the same way that pigs are and things like that. And like they're not halal and not kosher in that sense too. And like dogs, even in the Judaic Bible, or the Torah, I should say, and even in the Christian Bible, it's very hard if you look up right now, and even in Shakespeare as well, if you look up dogs, they're always referenced as an insult or referenced negatively in the Abrahamic religions, and Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which I find interesting because I'm trying to write about, this is another topic too, was trying to write about the medieval world. And it's like, well, dogs are kind of just used as hunting dogs, and like, they're seen as nobility, status symbols and all that, but also just pests, and they help hunters and all that. And then I'm like, okay, well, what's going on in the Arabic world? And it's like, oh, no mention of them because they're just seen as uncleanly and all that. So it just wasn't a lot to write about. So it's like, how do I do a book on world history of dogs minus that? Just navigating things like that. And that's, I think, actually, I'll qualify with, I think the one passage of a dog being loyal in any of the Abrahamic texts does come from the Quran. I don't think he's talking to Muhammad, but he's talking to the dogs, not talking to, the dogs associated with somebody. Is it Gabriel? Oh, Gabriel appears to Muhammad. I'm getting into the weeds here, but yeah, there's basically the one time a dog is referenced positively, and it's to do with loyalty in the 3 Abrahamic texts. I don't know about the Talmud, but the Talmud's different, is in the Quran, which I find cool. So all that to say, you know what? Let's take one more quick commercial break, and we'll be right back. And we're back with episode 30 of Ethnocynology. I've just dug myself into a hole, as I always do, without a guest. I started this by talking about the book and going to Mexico. All that to say, and I've said that 3 times now too, I can only read about this stuff so much. I've never been to Mexico City. I've never been to the heart of the Aztec Empire to see where all this stuff, and for those unfamiliar, the capital city, Tenochtitlan, is now Mexico City. So there's a lot of like ruins and temples and things like that sticking out of the ground still that are, protected cultural sites. But also the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City is one of the biggest in the world, archaeological museums, and has a lot of that stuff there. And I'm just excited to see all that and just see it with my own eyes for the book. And I'm broke and don't have the money to be doing this, but I was like, well, I need to do, I have to go see this stuff for the book because I can't write a book on it and then like publish it and sell it to hopefully millions of people and like not have gone there and seen this stuff. I'm not going to get to go to Egypt, but I think I can gather what I need to about Anubis from that part and stuff like that. But Mexican stuff is more accessible to me. I do speak Spanish well enough, so I might as well go. And that's part of what I'm doing. So if this is coming out after I'm in Mexico. So if you're listening to this in Mexico, sorry, I didn't meet up with you. But yeah, I want to see that stuff for myself and then so dogs have stayed on in that cultural tradition from the Aztec synchronism with Catholicism in folklore and like superstition around Mexico. So like another thing I'm doing with one of the tour guides is just talking to local people about that stuff and just to get some extra little tidbits of info to add in there. Cause if there's one thing I don't want to mess up, it's that, cause it is right there and it's modern people still practice that stuff. I don't think there's a lot of people like worshiping Anubis. So I don't think it'll be that. And there's not a lot of Zoroastrians walking around either, but there are a lot of Mexicans walking around who are very quick to tell you how much they love dogs and how important dogs are in Mexican culture. So that's something I will be doing. And then other parts of the book too, in like dealing with the big crescendo of it's like how dogs are teachers and the technology, they teach us about life and death and all that. And yeah, and like having written a bunch of that and then experiencing my uncle's passing, like while I'm finishing the tail end of that part of the book, it's like, oh, okay, I need to talk about that, but I don't want to talk about it too much, but I just want people to be able to like connect the dots with that. And I guess I don't want to talk about it too much because I haven't lost too many people, again, knock on wood, for me to talk about it like with confidence, because I want to compare one death and like speak for all of it, So I'm making this out to be like a crazy woo-woo book. It's not. I mean, it's just dogs, but again, it has to, and this is the part of the difficulty of writing a book is making it appealing to people that, might not be as interested in dogs in that sense, but that might appeal to them. So talking about that. And oh, right. Yeah. So I guess one thing we'll end that topic. If you have lost a person and lost a dog, think about how those two things are interconnected. And like, did you mourn more for the dog, mourn more for the person? Did you mourn quicker for the dog or mourn quicker for the person? Which one physically affected you more? Whose presence did you feel? I'm assuming if you lost like a mother or a brother, obviously the person's going to be the answer, but a lot of us haven't, like me. So like, what's that like for you? And then if you lost a dog, another thing I heard too in Polynesian culture, and bring it back to the crazy fever dream in the beginning, I'm not a dream person. I'm not I don't look at crystals. I don't read tarot cards. I don't do any of that crap. Not if you do that, I don't call it crap. Sorry. Just like, it's not my cup of tea. Not that I don't believe in it. It's just not something I do. However, I will say, after I visited my uncle before I went back to the funeral, I had an extremely vivid dream with Strider I normally, unless I'm sick, can't really remember or like physically see anything in dreams. They're just like concepts to me. And then I wake up, I like physically could see, touch, smell, interact with Strider. And it was this weird dream where it's like, oh, I'd put down clone Strider and like real Strider is still here, or like clone Strider is still here, or something like that. It was like a weird thing. And then he immediately went and attacked the cat in the other room. And it was just like, oh my God, I got to put this one down too. And it was just like this weird feeling in the thing. And I felt a sense of normalcy, if that makes sense, that I had my dog back and I'm like, oh, Strider's here. And like, he's not actually gone, and I could pet and interact with him. And I was like, whether that was real Strider visiting me from the dead, I don't know, or it was just a dream where I could like physically feel him, touch him and smell him and interact with him. And it just felt like oh, this is Strider. Like, he's here, which is not common for me in dreams. I chalk it up to scientifically. I'd been thinking about death and like that concept because my uncle had like, I think was just about to pass at this point. Yeah, it was just about to. And Strider came to visit me in a dream, which was interesting. And then the next day I was thinking about it. I was like, oh, okay, it's probably just because I've been thinking about death and grieving up until this point. But then I realized, oh, it's a year to the day since I put him down. That's why he appeared to me in a dream. So whether my brain was like, it's been a year to the date. I don't know if your brain can do that, can clock, it's been a year around the sun to the day, or it was just a combination of all of it. Or if we want to say it's some dogs have a spiritual presence like that in our lives that is metaphysically unexplained, maybe it is. But that was crazy to me. That was absolutely nuts to me when I like made that realization later in the day. I believe while I was like in the bathroom, I was like, what? That's crazy. And yeah, our modern meditation space. But all that to say, I brought that up to another friend who said that in Polynesian culture, I believe Guam is where they're from, said that when someone dies, you'll see 3 black dogs, like they'll appear, 3 black animals, I think is what it is, or a dog will appear in a dream or something like that. I'm misquoting that now. But again, that is something common in other cultures as well, that you'll see a black dog or a black animal, which signifies death. So maybe a Strider coming back as a black dog in my dream was then telling me 2 days later my uncle was going to pass, but we knew that was coming. Very interesting conceptually, just and metaphysically. And I feel terrible for saying tarot cards are crap. I just don't know about it. So that's why I'm calling it that. I don't mean to denigrate it or say anything negative about that. And I know I have a friend who's like into that. So I do apologize. I just need to be better with my words sometimes. But I meant more crystals. And if you're into crystals, we have a talk. I'm just kidding. But yeah, tarot cards, I think that's a different thing. But yeah, I'm not too into that stuff, but it was very interesting to me what that dream and like what that did, especially while writing a book about it. So, and then in the next meeting with my agent, I'm like, should I talk about this? And she was like, yeah, write that. So, but that's another thing too. And it's like, do I want to put that in a book? Because it's a scientific book, but then I'm writing these stories and all that. So please become a member of the APN if you are not already. But with that out of the way, I have moved my Patreon tiers around, and I've changed one to a book tier. If you want to help support the book and like writing it, especially for like a trip to Mexico and things like that I want to be able to include and help write it, there is a Patreon. It's patreon.com/Davey and How. You can do that. You want to help me there. I have also started, well, I haven't started yet, but if you do the $20 tier, I think is what it is, I'm going to start doing a monthly class where we all meet on Discord, and like I'll talk about a topic for like 10 minutes or so, and then we all discuss it as a group. I'm going to leave that for the $20 tier group, but if not a lot of people sign up for that, it makes it kind of moot. So maybe I'll just do it like a one-off ticket sale thing. Anyway, that tier is there if you want to join it. I haven't started that yet because I'm going to be in Mexico for 3 weeks. But when I get back and get that settled up, so next month you'll hear more about that. But if you want to, in the meantime, help support the book, you can do that through Patreon, and then just help keep the lights on for my channel and like the video aspect of this. And like, my dad sent me $200 for my birthday today. It's happy birthday. And then, not kidding, 20 minutes later, I got a fucking thing that was like Adobe Systems, and I got charged $120 for like the things I like, the, what do you call it? The subscription to Adobe charged me. I think it was $80 for that, but another thing charged me the same day. It all charged at the same time. And I was just like, damn, well, there goes that birthday money. So I think that was more just like the birthday present was that. But yeah, Patreon will help keep the lights on. And I appreciate you guys watching the videos. Every view on YouTube counts. Every like counts, especially likes lately. And there's a new hype points thing on YouTube now too. If you're watching the YouTube versions, please hit the hype button. That's such a weird thing to say. Smash that like button and the hype button. And if you're not a member of the APN, you can get access to exclusive stuff on the APN, backlogs of other episodes and things like that as a member. So please do that as well. And I've actually got this right at 58 minutes. So this is pretty good. Sorry for being sick. Sorry for the meandering wander. But I guess the main thing to take away from this is if you have experienced death in your life, what can you associate that with dogs? Like how have dogs manifested in the grieving process or in the pre-grieving process or through death or at a funeral and anything like that? And like one thing too, I noticed when I went to visit my uncle, there was a dog who had black fur when he was there. There's another, I think there was a white dog before that. And there was a puppy the other day after that too, was white. But yeah, just like, that's just coincidental. That's not like anything to do with that because it just happened. Like they could have had a red dog then too. But just like while I was there, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm seeing a person dying and there's also a dog in the house. It's just like one of those things. It's like an anthropological constant, just like birth, death, marriage, and rites of passage. There's also dogs are just present in human society. There's not a goat in the house. There's not a horse in the house. There's not a domestic chicken or a guinea pig. There's a dog in the house. And I think that's worth making a podcast about. So with that, we will wrap this episode up. Thank you very much. With that, we are out.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. The Archaeology Podcast Network's chief editor is Rachel Roden. Our executive producer is Ashley Airy. Our social media and newsletter coordinator is Matilda Siebrecht. The APN was founded by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle on December 1st, 2014. We're supported by our amazing podcast hosts, many volunteers, and listeners like you. Check out membership at www.archpodnet.com/members.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.